Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Austin here, bringing you guys game number 2 between TSL HyuN and Acer Nerchio. HyuN is our blue Zerg spawning at the bottom left of Daybreak, up against Nerchio, the red Zerg at the top right. This is a mirror matchup, Zerg versus Zerg. And game number 1 was quite cheesy. I casted that before I did my Tasia versus Stefano series, which was so epic and so recent I had to bring it to you right away. I put this series on hold for that little best of 3. But I do remember that game number 1 was cheesy. It lasted 4 StarCraft minutes. And our Korean Zerg player from Team SCV Life came out on top, he did expand, but went for an awfully quick pool, and just overwhelmed Nerchio with lings. The Polish player was quite upset at that, vocally. I didn't quite understand what he typed out. If you guys want to check that out and maybe try to decode that for me. But it was evident enough that he was a little bit enraged, with reason. But in StarCraft 2, the object of the game is to win by any means possible, within the reasonable context, without hacking, or anything of that sort, of course. So HyuN did just that, and I would expect Nerchio to be a little bit on edge this time. He's going to be probably bringing a Overlord Scout directly into his opponent's base, even risking it to a Queen, just to be sure that there's no quick pool or cheese on the way. It's kind of psychology and counter-psychology. Nerchio might not be expecting cheese for the second time in a row, and HyuN could go for it as a result, or HyuN could just kind of subside, thinking that Nerchio expects him to cheese again. So he's gotten his opponent on edge by winning, not by losing. It's better to actually take the game that you cheese than lose, and also put your opponent on edge. Having his opponent alert is just a bonus, and forces Nerchio to act very, very careful and calculate every move as if he is going to soon be under attack. He does have his spawning pool slightly ahead of HyuN's. Both players have just gone up to 2 bases, so there will not be any predominant cheese in this game from what I can see thus far. Less Overlords develop a way to attack. HyuN would be in a pretty good spot. It would be kind of a base trade Overlord style, because Nerchio is almost in the exact same position on the other side of the map. HyuN's hatchery is... I don't even know this. These are almost perfectly tied, the hatchery timings. I think HyuN's might be a half second ahead or something of that sort. Maybe not even. It looks like they're in sync if you can see the little shifting of my mouse. Though Nerchio does have the lead in the spawning pool anyway. So these players very, very close in terms of timings. There is equally a gas in Nerchio's base, and both players opting for 2 queens. However, we finally have come to our first difference. HyuN is going to start his metabolic boost slightly ahead of his opponents. I can imagine Nerchio going to be starting it quite soon. He doesn't have as much gas banked up. He must have built his extractor slightly later. He does have the queen. The advantage in when his queen is going to finish. 4 lings on the way here from HyuN, and a baneling nest from Nerchio. You often see in ZvZ ling, baneling, roach, infester. In order. Roaches and infestors together, lings and banelings together. You'll still see lings with a roach army, not really banelings outside of early pressure. On this very map, HyuN versus Slivko, same colors, same positions. HyuN walked in with some banelings and was able to just devastate his opponent. It might not have actually been the same map. I'm not sure if it was Daybreak or not. It was a very long time ago. I do know it was the same positions and same colors. Not certain on the map. Nerchio only now getting his metabolic boost started. He does have a spine crawler at his natural. That will prevent any sort of baneling damage. Or actually, Nerchio is the one that has the baneling nest. HyuN only getting his now, so it should be HyuN that has a spine crawler. I was misinterpreting. As I was mentioning before, HyuN against Slivko, he got a critical detonation in game number 1 or 2, one of the earlier games of a best of 5 series from another weekly tournament, the Antic Attack, and just destroyed his opponent's harvester line, and that won him the game. You'll often see that in... I forget the more recent tournament that Stefano was playing in. It might have been the DreamHack or slightly earlier. I believe it was WCS Europe. Against Vortex, Stefano got a baneling detonation off that was critical in one game, and that turned the tide in his favor. It might have even been Vortex. I know that those 2 players were playing each other. Not sure who did what, but I do know that was the critical game-changing moment. So this ling-baneling period is quite volatile. One player can gain a definitive advantage if the other one slips up just minorly in micro. In PvP, it's more so keeping your units alive. In TvT, it's a lot more macro-oriented. But this is what makes ZvZ so interesting, is how one little slip up in your drone micro and in your spine crawler positioning could cost you the game. We have Lair on the way for both players, and missile attacks level 1 for Nerchio. HyuN seems to be making some lings. They have had metabolic boosts for quite a while longer than Nerchio's forces have, but hey, HyuN didn't put on any aggression before Nerchio was able to get his speed, so what does it matter? We do have a Spire on the way from Nerchio, and a Roach Warren on the contrary for HyuN. I sort of disagree with the Spire in ZvZ. If it's well scouted, which can tend to be difficult, HyuN does have Lair, however, so he could feasibly get an Overseer, as I believe he is now getting. And if he's able to see the Spire, it takes a whole 100 seconds to produce. He's actually going for something of willing run by here. A lot of these wings have taken damage. If you're able to see it, it's completely negated, as in generally any matchup, yet especially in ZvZ, because it's a mirror matchup. If you're behind, you're definitively behind. In other matchups, you can find ways back into the game, but in ZvZ, if you go Mutas and it fails on you, your opponent can have a maxed out Roach Infestor force and be able to completely punish you for it. I do know that HyuN has seen a Spire. He got this Overseer as I recommended, was able to keep it alive with just 3 health, and has seen the Spire. He's not really reacted to it as of yet. No Spore Crawlers on the way, and no sign of Hydralisks, any sort of an anti-air counter, not even adding on Queens. He only does have 2. So he scouted it, but it's essentially not done too much for him, in the sense that he hasn't really reacted. He's only getting 1 more Queen. He has his missile attacks level 1, which could help supplement his Queen's air attack and also ground attack. There's actually a Baneling detonation going off. I missed that slightly for Nerchio, doing minor damage to HyuN's Queen. No workers killed. Not a huge big deal there. Handful of speed wings outside of the third of HyuN. There is now a flock of Mutalisks on the way. HyuN is getting 5 Spore Crawlers. He has 6 total. He's going to be putting on some aggression at the third base here. 1 Queen is killed, and now these Spore Crawlers will likely be targeted down. No way for these drones to repair this Spore Crawler. It will shortly finish, however. And probably die right after at the cost of a couple of Mutas. Not even any Mutas for Nerchio. Very well microed there from him. He does lose 1 now against 2 Queens. Able to transfuse just as 1 dies. That's pretty pristine micro from HyuN. Though the Mutas, they've been doing quite well. A handful of drones killed, only 2. They're just aggressing this third base, sniping an odd drone. The Spore Crawler now buried itself here. There's a good fungal, trapping down 3 of the Mutas. If the HyuN is able to chain this, because he did get Pathogen Glands, my bad for not pointing that out, and also Roach Speed. Let's focus more on the Mutas and the general state of ZvZ. He's been able to kind of defend against this. He got his Spore Crawlers too little too late, considering he scouted the Spire way earlier than he actually reacted to it. Macro Hatch on the way from HyuN. Slivko HyuN, too many Zergs! Nerchio, in addition to ranged attacks level 1 on his ground units, Pathogen Glands, and 4 Infestors with his Roach Speed on the way. He's definitely delayed his researches and tech for this harassment. It's done him some good. 7 workers killed. That puts our income tab at only... Actually, Nerchio's been able to get ahead by 6 Harvesters. He's also been able to grab a 4th base. That turned the tide in his favor, for sure, as HyuN just not looking as sharp to take it at this point. I thought he was going to go for a strong, traditional ZvZ style army with heavy Roach Infestor. He has been trying to do so, but the stalling that Nerchio was able to bestow upon him gave him the advantage. He lost some Mutas. He probably lost more resources than an opponent. Actually, he did not. I thought he would. He's lost 900 less. He has just clawed his way ahead of his opponent. He was slightly behind in terms of tech for a little bit. He never really dropped too far behind him in this game. There was no moment where he lost a Baneling engage or lost too many drones. He's lost none. He did sacrifice his upgrades slightly and his infestors, but HyuN's put on no aggression, so it's not like it's cost him anything, just like I said earlier with those speed wings. HyuN got it faster, but he didn't abuse it. Now, there's going to be a Roach Infestor force mobilizing now, with 5 Hydras on their way, and Grooved Spines, the range upgrade. Nerchio only now going to be getting his Hydralisk Den. I forgot to mention that earlier. In ZvZ, Hydras are also often added on for extra DPS, and they're a fantastic counter to Mutalisks. They're great behind Roaches. If you get a line of Roaches firing, the Hydras have so much DPS, 14 total, with a very high attack speed. Colossi do something like 19 damage with a few upgrades, which is massive. The Hydras do not have AoE, which really makes the Colossi as powerful as they are, but that's quite a high number. Roaches do have 20 damage with a much slower attack speed, so I believe the Hydra would actually have more DPS. You'd have something like 28, maybe even 28 point something, because 0.83 doesn't go wholly into 2. Hydras, I would say, have a higher DPS. Don't be fooled by the actual number you see. Be fooled by the weapon speed as well. Both players are maxed out, but let's look at our supplies. 129 to 118 for HyuN. He is leading. He's got his force somewhat clumped up and not well positioned. You always want your infestors behind, never able to get targeted down by your opponent's roaches. You do not want to lose your infestors prior to a massive engagement. Even at the beginning of a massive engagement. We are now going to see a move out here, and there are 4 infestors, very vulnerable. One of them does die. A lot of fungals on their way from HyuN, but he gets all of his own Hydralisk's fungal. This is a huge engagement, and a lot of infested Terrans on their way. It looks like Nerchio's gotten a far better concave. He's using a lot of infested Terrans to drive his opponent back. HyuN reproducing 18 roaches, but Nerchio's got 37. He's remaxed, and his opponent is not. I was on HyuN's vision for some weird reason there. He was able to get some aggression off at the 4th base, but he loses his 4th base all the while. Both players getting their ground carapace level 1 at roughly the same time, and I never even realized that there's a number 1 right here. Why would there be 2 carapace upgrades simultaneously? That's a little bit strange. It makes sense to have 1 hive, because there could technically be 2 hives, 1 creep trimmer, but there would not be 2 ground carapace level 1s. Just a little note there, a perfectionist's note. That was a perfect engagement there from Nerchio, as perfect as it can get. Like I said, the infestor positioning, he was just able to snipe 1 and force them back. They weren't able to get too many good fungals off. Nerchio fungled the weaker Hydras, the DPS component of a Zerg army, and came out on top in that engage. HyuN does not have enough bases to actually be able to remax. He's got 3 hatcheries, 3 mining hatcheries, 2 gas at each. He's 11 harvesters behind, however. I would argue Nerchio's over-droned maybe a little bit, as 77 drones, I don't know about you guys, I would say that's slightly high. It does give him a very strong economy, however, and he'll be able to reproduce his army in a matter of seconds, as we saw in that past engage. He's got a higher amount of gas because Nerchio has been able to keep his 4th base up strong, and he's been able to keep these 2 heart extractors mining. He's now getting his 5th. HyuN has been able to remax. It all comes down to the engagement yet again. He's mixing in 2 Banelings here to maybe get off some critical detonations. He's going to build his 4th base. He desperately needs this. He needs to double expand on the back of this and try his best to get back into this game. He definitely needs to put on some degree of aggression, maybe even drops. He's getting his 3 missile attacks. Well, Nerchio opts for 2 carapace. HyuN only does have 1 carapace, so he's going for pure damage here. Damage versus defense. That's really the comparison. And let's see how HyuN's going to be able to do it. Infested Terrans on their way yet again. This Baneling dies, and it looks like he's been able to get fairly nice fungals off on his opponent's roaches, but he wants the Hydralisks and even the Infested Terrans. Both players doing quite well, but the Infested Terrans of Nerchio are giving him a very good concave. He pulls out here. He'll be able to claim a lot of HyuN's forces in the middle of doing so, however, as he's now up by 60 supply and remaxing agonizingly fast. He's got 18 Hydras and 13 Roaches on the way, as opposed to the only 19 Roaches of HyuN, 11 of which just finished. Now, Nerchio will be temporarily forced back, but just you watch his huge force that's going to soon arrive on the battlefield, we have Burrow from Nerchio. I thought that was from HyuN. I was thinking that's just the kind of thing he needs. Burrowed Infestors to deal some damage to his opponent. Does he actually have Burrow researched? Yes! So my bad, he does have his Burrow. And that's a smart idea. I haven't seen him abuse it too much in this game, however. Saw Stefano do that an awful lot against Tasia. And he loves to use Burrowed Infestors. Very smart, grasping tactic. We have another engage now. It looks like Nerchio is just going to keep throwing out these Infested Terrans. He loses a lot of Infestors of his own, but his Concave very nice on one side of the army. On the other side, it looks like he's losing slightly, but the DPS of the Hydra's going to melt through these roaches. HyuN is retreating. This could shortly be GG. Nerchio has come back in the best possible way from a game 1 in which HyuN cheesed him. His Hydras and Infested Terrans are getting bungled, but it looks like he has far too much resources banked up. He's up by almost 100 supply at this point. It's looking phenomenal for him. HyuN getting his 3-2. It's not going to finish, however, as he will call the GG. Nerchio replies quite quickly. He's probably very satisfied. Always great to beat somebody who cheeses you with just an upfront macro game. Not to detract from HyuN's macro ability at all. He's a fantastic late game player. But let's see how this comes about in game number 3. This is a best of 5 series. 1-1. Peace!